In the chaos of World War II, rust wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a silent enemy. Steel weapons, ships, and vehicles, the very backbone of the Allied war effort, were corroding faster than factories could replace them. Every drop of moisture, every grain of salt, was eating away at the machinery of war. But under the immense pressure of necessity, Allied engineers developed a remarkable solution: a simple, hand-applied polish that made steel virtually immune to rust, even in the harshest environments. By the early 1940s, the sheer scale of corrosion across the battlefronts had become a full-blown crisis. Imagine tanks bogged down in mud, their tracks and gears seizing up. Picture aircraft standing on wet airfields, delicate aluminum and steel slowly being eaten away. And then there were the ships, facing months of relentless exposure to corrosive saltwater spray. Traditional oils and greases offered only temporary relief. They washed off in the rain, melted in the tropical heat of the Pacific, and froze solid in the brutal winters of the Eastern Front. Every corroded rifle, every seized engine, was a potential failure in combat. A moment where a soldier's life hung in the balance. With materials and supply lines already stretched to their breaking point, the Allies needed a breakthrough, something better than oil, something that could last. British and American research teams, from the Royal Engineers to the U.S. Navy's Bureau of Ships, began a frantic search for an anti-corrosion formula that could withstand every climate on Earth. The goal wasn't just to coat the metal, but to bond with it at a chemical level, creating an invisible shield against moisture and oxygen. It was a race between chemistry and corrosion, a high-stakes competition where the future of equipment and battles was on the line. And the winning formula would prove to be as elegant as it was effective. After countless experiments, researchers finally stumbled upon a unique blend that changed everything. A mixture of microcrystalline wax, lanolin, a natural oil derived from sheep's wool, and an oxidized petroleum compound they called metal polish compound X5. When applied to clean steel, this mixture didn't just sit on the surface like a coat of paint. It chemically interacted with the metal, creating a micro-thin, waterproof layer that repelled air and water at the molecular level. The results from field tests were astonishing. Steel plates treated with this new polish were left outside for more than a year, exposed to the elements near the sea, and showed no visible rust. It was so effective that soldiers began calling it the forever shine. So what made this polish so extraordinary? It wasn't just its endurance, it was the clever chemistry behind it. Unlike oil or grease that merely cover the surface, the X5 compound contained trace phosphates and organic acids. When rubbed into steel, these elements would slightly etch the outer layer, forming a thin, stable film of iron phosphate, a material naturally resistant to corrosion. Once that chemical barrier was formed, it was sealed under the protective layer of wax and lanolin, making the metal almost impervious to oxygen and water. It was sophisticated science turned into soldier-proof simplicity, a barrier that was both chemical and physical. And one of the key ingredients, lanolin, came straight from nature. This soft, non-drying oil extracted from sheep's wool has an amazing ability to penetrate microscopic pores in metal and remain flexible for years without cracking. When combined with microcrystalline wax, it created a remarkable self-healing surface. If the coating got scratched, the nearby wax and lanolin molecules would slowly flow to reseal the exposed metal. This meant a soldier could polish their weapon once and rely on it to stay clean and rust-free through an entire campaign. This revolutionary polish quickly became invaluable to engineers in the field. Naval crews used it on deck guns, navigation tools, and exposed metal fittings to survive the endless salt spray. Tank crews buffed their armor and mechanical joints before crossing rivers or deserts, preventing catastrophic failures in the heat of battle. Airmen applied it to propellers, landing gear, and engine housings to extend the service life of their aircraft. It wasn't glamorous work, but it saved equipment, it saved time, and it undoubtedly saved lives. In a war where logistics meant survival, this small innovation carried an enormous impact. Field manuals from 1943 describe the process in simple, practical steps. First, a soldier would clean the metal surface with kerosene or another solvent to remove any existing oil and rust. Then they'd gently warm the metal, often just by leaving it in the sun or near a small field stove, which helped open its microscopic pores. A thin layer of the polish was then rubbed in by hand until the metal darkened and developed a deep shine. Once it cooled, the surface hardened into a dry, waxy film that resisted fingerprints, moisture, and the passage of time. Even when official supplies ran short, the troops got creative. They improvised their own versions, mixing beeswax, lanolin, and a touch of turpentine or paraffin oil. The result wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to keep their rifles and tools serviceable for months on end. This spirit of adaptation was everywhere. In some U.S. naval workshops, mechanics started adding powdered graphite to the polish for moving parts, a clever modification that reduced friction while still keeping water out. These field-engineered versions showed just how practical and adaptive wartime science could be. It wasn't about complex labs or fancy equipment. It was about innovation born from pure necessity, using whatever was on hand to keep the machinery of war alive. After the war, the success of this humble polish quietly influenced the future of modern corrosion control. The same core chemistry evolved into the industrial phosphate coatings, wax-based protectants, and oil-impregnated seals used in machinery and weapons storage to this day. One direct descendant is still widely used: cosmoline, the heavy, waxy coating used by militaries worldwide to preserve firearms in long-term storage. Its roots trace directly back to those World War II experiments with lanolin and wax. And even now, more than 80 years later, museums and preservationists still rely on similar formulas to protect priceless antique weapons and tools. Lanolin-based protectants remain popular because they're effective, gentle, and don't trap moisture or damage historic finishes. Every time a curator buffs an old rifle with wax and oil, they're unknowingly repeating a process first refined on the battlefields of World War II, a process that saved thousands of tons of steel from decaying into rust. The story of the World War II rust-proof polish is more than just a tale of chemistry. It's a powerful lesson in resourcefulness and ingenuity. Scientists and soldiers didn't have access to modern synthetic polymers or advanced sealants. They had wax, oil, and a massive problem that demanded a creative solution. The result was simple, sustainable, and incredibly effective. It reminds us that real innovation doesn't always require complexity. Sometimes, it just takes a deep understanding of the materials you already have. This secret polish that made steel last for years was far more than a wartime convenience. It was a triumph of practical ingenuity. It kept weapons firing, ships afloat, and machines moving in some of the harshest conditions on Earth. And though its official name may have faded from history, its legacy endures every time a craftsman preserves a tool or a restorer brings a piece of history back to life. Because sometimes, the greatest technologies aren't built in massive factories or high-tech labs. They're forged in the fires of necessity. One rag, one polish, and one brilliant idea at a time. Thanks for watching. If you found this piece of hidden history as fascinating as I did, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories you won't find in the textbooks. See you next time.